Welcome to the Oasis Network Roadshow. My name is Tom Arnould, and I have the privilege today of being your host for the next hour. And we have today a very special repeat guest, and his name is Dr. Everett Piper. Dr. Piper, welcome to today's Roadshow.
Tom, great to join you again.
Well, Dr. Piper, your first roadshow, the first interview we had together, that was a great roadshow. It was a blessing. It's been re-aired. There's a lot of people that have enjoyed that roadshow. I've had positive comments on that. And I want to say today, I'm just as excited, if not more so excited, about this second roadshow.
Well, I'm glad you are. Well, let's hope that's the case after we're done. Time will tell, right?
Well, I'll tell you a little background on Dr. Piper. He's a columnist for the Washington Times. He's also a former university president, radio host, current radio host. He wrote a national bestseller called Not a Daycare: The Devastating Consequences of Abandoning Truth. And that book put him on the map in a way that I don't think Dr. Piper ever believed how far and wide his influence would be as a result of that book.
Well, it was a blessing. I think we talked about it before, so I don't want to belabor that too long on this particular episode of your show. But yeah, it was back in 2015 when I was still serving as president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University. I've since retired, served for almost 18 years there in that capacity. But in 2015, if people will remember, it was kind of the pinnacle of the Snowflake Rebellion, where the daily news was just filled with stories of students crying for safe spaces on their campuses, trigger warnings, microaggressions, safe spaces. Colleges were actually providing puppies. They were bringing in puppies for students to cuddle. During finals week, they could cuddle a puppy or pet a goat. They actually had a petting zoo at one of the universities in the Northeast where they brought in baby goats to make the students feel more comfortable in the anxieties of academic life and what was taking place in the world around them. The stories were on and on and on. Halloween costumes were being canceled. Faculty were getting fired because they said something that the students just didn't like. It made the student feel uncomfortable. It was during the first Trump administration, the campaign for Donald Trump, and when he prevailed in that election, students were literally crying and wailing, gnashing up teeth in the college green and college dorms, campuses, and whatnot. Well, in the middle of all that, I wrote an article which basically said, this is a university, it's not a daycare. If you expect us to coddle you rather than to confront you, if you expect us to make you comfortable rather than challenge you and encourage you to become more mature in your thinking, more mature as an intellectual being, then you're in the wrong place. Again, it's a university, it's not a daycare. Grow up. And that commentary caught fire. Several million people reviewed that opinion piece. That opinion piece led to several appearances on Fox and Friends and Glenn Beck and Dana Perino, and even Dave Rubin and Adam Carolla covered that story. You covered that story. So that's chapter one in my surprise of having my 5 minutes of fun and fame, if you will. And then my publisher asked me to write a book on that. That was titled Not a Daycare. You've referenced it. And then after Not a Daycare did well, the publisher wanted me to write another book. So the sequel to Not a Daycare is a book called Grow Up: Life Isn't Safe, But It's Good. So that's a whirlwind tour of my time in the media, and I suppose why I'm talking to you and your audience today.
Yeah, so today what we want to do is feature what Dr. Piper was just mentioning, this second book, Grow Up. And we're just going to talk about this book and talk about the life application of growing up, maturing, the word that I was introduced to a number of years ago, adulting. What does it mean whenever you transition from that adolescent phase to an adulthood stage of life? Now, Dr. Piper, I want to say a couple things right out of the gate here. I got two books on my desk right here, okay? One book is a book called Grow Up by Dr. Everett Piper, but I got another book that predated that book.
Let me guess what it was. It's the Bible.
The Bible. There you have it. And the theme of that book, time and time and time and time again, is one thing: grow up. Everything from Genesis, be fruitful and multiply, ever since the promise that God gave Joshua to go in and possess the land. The Lord gave promises time and time again. The prominent parable Jesus gave was a parable of the sower, and it was all about a seed growing. And then the letters that the Apostle Paul wrote about growing up spiritually. And then, of course, the last words of Peter, 2 Peter 3, is, but grow in the grace and the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. So you're in good company if you write a book about grow up, because the whole Bible, the theme, is about the importance of maturity and how we need to grow in our spiritual life. So, Dr. Piper, grow up. It's a needed topic today. Would you agree?
Well, it is. And I want to make it clear, this is not a commentary on age. And I still feel a little self-conscious about it in terms of this book that was the sequel to Not a Daycare. Some take it as an attack on millennials, Gen Z, and youth, and that it's grandpa wagging his finger in the face of all those youngsters out there telling them to get off his front lawn. I don't want a hint of that misconception to play out in terms of why this book was written, because adulthood really doesn't have anything to do with age. It has to do with character. And we become mature as the result of iron sharpening iron, as the result of diversity, as the result of being tested by fire. That's a biblical concept, obviously. It's the adversity in life, the challenges of life. It's the no pain, no gain axiom that your coach probably told you when you were a young man in junior high, high school, or collegiate sports. So this idea of maturity, of growing up, when Paul challenges the first century church to grow up, he's not talking just to teenagers. He's talking to everybody. When God challenges us through Scripture to mature in our walk with Christ, it's not a commentary on the adolescents or on the teenagers or the young people of the time. It's a challenge to everyone. So let's just set the stage for the rest of what we're talking about today. That if you are in the younger category and you're listening to this right now, it's not two old guys commiserating, telling you to get off our lawn. This is a challenge that the Apostle Paul gives the church. This is a challenge that God gave to Israel repeatedly. This is a challenge to recognize that if your Father loves you, he will discipline you. God loves us, therefore he disciplines us. If there is no discipline, then it would be an indication of a lack of love, and we are told over and over and over again in Scripture. In the Proverbs, we're told that iron sharpens iron, let one man sharpen another, and even in the New Testament, again, we're told that adversity brings maturity, and that it's the challenges of life that actually build our character and cause us to become more confident and more capable in our walk with God and our ability to be a good example, to be good testimonies to the people around us. So again, that's a long way around the barn for me to say, don't fixate on age, people. This isn't about age. This is not about how old you are. This is about what kind of character you have.
Well, Dr. Piper, one of the statements that you made in this book that I thought was really great was just the simple statement of this: if you want to become an adult, be willing to listen to an adult. And it's the Proverbs 13:20, like you had mentioned, if you're going to be wise, walk with the wise, and how that the people you associate with can sharpen you or they can dull you, depending on the influences. And so on today's roadshow, we're with Dr. Everett Piper, and we're just talking today about the importance of all of us being sharpened, growing, maturing, developing. It's like one fellow said, he died at age 40 and they buried him at 85. Meaning he just never grew. What you learn past age 50 is really so important. What you learn past age 60 or 70 even, just have to be a lifelong student, always grow, always develop, always mature. And in this book that Dr. Piper has written, he talks about the importance of growth. And I'm just going to say this. We all have blind spots. In other words, everybody on this planet has something in common, and that is we have blind spots. We think we're further down the road than we are, or we think maybe that we're developed in some areas. And then you read a book, whether it's the Bible, number one, or whether this book by Dr. Piper, and you just get to thinking, you know what? These are good areas for us to circle on and to dwell on. So, one of the things Dr. Piper emphasizes when he talks about maturity, growth, progress in our lives, adulthood stage, one of the things he talks about is this: your ability to accept responsibility, and how that's one of the things that confronts anyone, independent of their age. One measurement of maturity is how responsible will this individual be. Dr. Piper, let's just take about a minute or so, talk about that, then we're going to take a break. And on the other side of the break, we'll develop that topic, okay? Maturity, responsibility.
I think one of the hallmarks of our age is that we don't want, again, regardless of how old you are, we shirk responsibility. We want comfort more than we want liberty. The subtitle to Grow Up is Life Isn't Safe, But It's Good, and that's playing off of a quote from C.S. Lewis, actually in the children's series, The Chronicles of Narnia, where the great lion Aslan, the Jesus character, Jesus figure, the Christ figure of that particular series of C.S. Lewis's, Aslan says that life isn't safe, but it's good. Actually, it's Mr. and Mrs. Beaver in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that say to the children when they're confused over who Aslan is, they're fearful of him because they hear that a lion is on the loose. And they wonder, is this lion safe? And they ask the talking animals, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, is Aslan safe? Is the lion safe? And Mr. Beaver kind of guffaws and he says, well, of course he's not safe, but he's good. If we set any pretext for everything else we're going to talk about today, it's that truth. The church isn't supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be good. The ivory tower isn't supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be good. There's a great difference between goodness and safety. And we should prefer the goodness over and above the safety, because we can be safe and be coddled and comfortable. We can be taken care of by our parents or by the government. But that safety will not engender maturity. It will not engender liberty and freedom, because you can live in your mom and dad's basement until you're 85. That safety is going to make you comfortable, but that is not the good life. And I think we could all agree on that if you stop and think about some of those extreme examples or anecdotes that I would use to try to explain what C.S. Lewis was telling us. So again, everybody should recognize that when the Bible or anybody else calls upon us to grow up and move beyond whatever stage in life we're now in and become better than we now are through that maturation process, that one of the principles of that growth is it's not safe to stay where you are. Well, it may be safe to stay where you are, but it isn't good. It isn't good. An athlete should understand that. Okay, you can be safe in your current abilities, but that's not good because you probably won't get on the court very much. A musician should understand that. You can be safe in your current ability to play the piano or the guitar, but if you're not practicing, if you're not experiencing pain, if you're not maturing in those abilities and that discipline that comes with it, then you're never going to play a concerto. You're always going to be closer to chaos. So that's the principle of grow up.
So that is the voice of Dr. Everett Piper. He is our guest for this hour. My name is Tom Arnould. You're listening to the Oasis Radio Network. We're going to take a break at this point. We're going to come back on the other side of the break, and we're going to dive into one of the foundations of maturity. How do we measure maturity in our life? It's the ability to accept responsibility. We'll be right back right after this.
I'm David Warren here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world.
From a dry, thirsty land, I found an oasis of love. Oasis Network.
Welcome back to this second segment of today's Roadshow. My name is Tom Arnould. We have today our special guest, Dr. Everett Piper. Dr. Piper is a repeat guest on the Roadshow, and we're talking about an important topic, and we're talking about growing up spiritually, growing up in the spiritual realm and the natural realm, really in all aspects of our life. Dr. Piper has given his life to working with university life, working with students, helping people to grow. And there was a pivot a few years ago to where the Lord gave him a national platform, to where he really is a voice to the nation. I compare him to John the Baptist, that just like John the Baptist was a singular voice crying in the wilderness, in some level, Dr. Piper at times may seem like he is a singular voice in a wilderness of higher ed, trying to help people to see the truths of God's Word. Dr. Piper, we're excited about today's Roadshow.
Well, again, thanks for having me on. This is always fun.
Well, Dr. Piper, we're talking about growing up, and we're really saying if you had to put a theme on the Bible, the theme of the Bible would be grow up. I mean, think about statements like Jesus making the statement, I got a lot of things to say to you, but I really can't give it to you right now because you're not able to receive it. And then we think about in Hebrews, whenever the Apostle Paul, I believe, wrote the book of Hebrews, and how he makes the statement, though, by this time you ought to be teachers, you have needs that someone teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. So, throughout the Scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, you see this parallel, and that is there's this push to grow. And one of the things that Dr. Piper just mentioned, that we kind of like to get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't want to get pushed out of the nest.
Yeah.
I remember one time, Dr. Piper, the Lord just put that illustration in my heart, and that is, Tom, you're going to have to get out of the nest here. You're kind of comfortable at this season of your life. And the Lord made it very clear to me, kind of like that little eagle is so comfortable in that nest, and I really don't want to get out of this nest. But the eagle's not going to learn to fly unless you get out of the nest. Your thoughts?
It's a perfect analogy, and that's why it has endured the test of time. I mean, how many times have we heard you need to kick them out of the nest? Because until you kick the hatchling out of the nest, it's never going to learn to fly. So there comes a time when that little bird has to take that first leap, if you will. And sometimes it's a leap that results in a great tumble, because that maturing process is just necessary. That pain of jumping over the edge is necessary, or else that bird is going to stagnate and probably die an early death because it never became what it was supposed to be. I learned this long ago. I think it was Jerry Bridges, who's dead now, but a great author, a Christian writer. I think he wrote a book. I can't remember the name of the book. I'll probably recall it while I'm sharing this analogy. But I remember he drew the parallel between a butterfly and maturity. And I didn't know this, but I think it's scientifically true that if you try to release the butterfly from the cocoon prematurely, if you see it struggling to fight its way out of the cocoon, what will happen is you'll release it out of sympathy. You think you're helping it. You think you're accelerating its process of becoming a free thing that will be beautiful and able to fly like butterflies do. But what you really do is you stagnate its growth, because it's the pushing, it's the fight, it's the wrestle of working its way out of the cocoon that causes the blood to pump through the veins of the wings and helps it to develop. And if it doesn't go through that process, that butterfly will never fly because its wings were never mature enough to carry it. Jerry Bridges uses that as an example of the Christian life, that God allows us to fight through adversity. And if we don't do that, if we don't take that responsibility, to go back to the theme that you want to talk about right now, if God doesn't put the responsibility on us, if he carries it all himself, if he doesn't allow us to become part of the process by engaging in the wrestling match, engaging in the push and pull of life, the adversity of life, the pain of life, the challenges of life, then the blood never courses through our soul, through our wings, and we're never able to become the thing that God wants us to be. So this process of taking responsibility for the life around us and not living in the basement metaphorically, or expecting handouts from everybody else, or even blaming the world around us for all of our adversity and all of our difficulties. All of these are symptoms of the same thing. And that's a culture that we've created not only on our college campuses, but I would argue in the judicial courts and in the halls of Congress and across our entire culture. It's kind of this perpetual adolescence, if you will, constant ongoing immaturity of expecting all of the pain, all of the adversity of life to be taken care of by somebody else so that we can feel safe and comfortable. And that's not the good life. It's not a life of maturity. It's a life of ongoing childishness, if you will.
I think of the words of the Apostle Paul when he just told Timothy, you need to endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. In other words, he didn't say you need to escape hardness, you need to avoid hardness, but it's the tough times that build character in our life, and it's sticking with the job you really wanted to quit, and it's staying in that class that you wanted to withdraw from, and it's those times whenever you just have to dig deep, because I promise, all of our listeners, at some point, the toughness of life will serve you. It'll be to your advantage. Dr. Piper, when we think about responsibility, personal responsibility, it's squarely founded in the Bible. In other words, the Bible emphasizes the importance of being responsible. Deuteronomy talks about the father shall not be put to death because of the children, and the children are not going to be put to death because of the sins of the father, but each will be put to death for their own sin. Now, I know that's a heavy scripture there, but the idea being is at some point I can't pin it on my dad, I can't pin it on my basketball coach that cut me in 7th grade, or, I have to say, look, this is what I have to work with. How can I take my life and present it to God and ask him to make a beautiful mosaic out of the damaged circumstances of life?
I appreciate the fact that you've emphasized that particular principle, because I do think it's a challenge for everybody. It's a challenge for you. It's a challenge for me. It's a challenge for everybody in our current culture, because our culture is one of comfort. To revisit a theme that I'm probably going to repeat multiple times as we talk today, our culture is a culture of comfort and safety. How did we react to the COVID crisis as a people? How did we react to it? We worshiped at the altar of safety and comfort during the COVID crisis. We recoiled to the potential that life could be difficult, and we wanted it to all be controlled by somebody. The experts needed to rush in and control this crisis, and we were willing, as a people, not just in America, but around the world, we were willing to sacrifice some very important things for the sake of that safety and that comfort. And one of the things that we obviously sacrificed was our liberty and our freedom. So again, I think the biblical principle of God repeatedly, the whole story of Israel is one of, okay, I've made a promise. God makes a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He calls upon the Israelites to fulfill their half of the covenant, their portion of the covenant. They fail through their sin. They're punished for that sin. God doesn't break his word. He holds out an invitation to return, to repent, to confess, and to come back home, take responsibility for their mistakes, their sins, and accept the growth process that has taken place as the result of this, and come back to him as more mature people. Isn't that a fair way to summarize almost all of the Old Testament? Again, and it repeats itself in the New Testament, especially with Paul's teaching, where he calls upon the church to stop. Stop the sin, stop the selfishness, stop the adolescence, stop it. Grow up and become obedient followers of Christ, recognizing that it's the adversity of life, that it is by fire you've been tested, and the metal is stronger as the result of that. Yeah. You brought it upon yourself, but God can always redeem these evil things that you've brought upon yourselves. He can redeem them for good if you accept the responsibility to humble yourself before him in repentance and confession. If that doesn't summarize the Old Testament and the New Testament, I don't know what does. So this is one of the key lessons that, again, every parent understands it. You understand that your children are never going to grow if they're always experiencing comfort. They're never challenged. It's one of the things that really bothers me about the helicopter parent movement is parents are swooping in at every minute to rescue their kids from a lost basketball game or soccer game or the fact that they didn't start. Or I can't tell you the number of times, Tom, while I was a university president, where the parents would come in and blame the university for the problem rather than pushing their kid to accept the problem. Bad grades, or perhaps they broke the code of conduct and they had to suffer some discipline as the result of that, being put on probation or suspension. I'll say this and I'll take a breath. I would turn to my student development staff when I was a dean of students. If we had a kid that broke the rules, he was out drinking or partying or whatever he had done, he broke the rules of this Christian college. It was our responsibility to hold him accountable for breaking those rules. And often that would result in probation or suspension from school. Okay? I knew if this was going to work out well for the kid or if it was going to work out poorly based on one phone call. And that was my phone call to mom and dad.
Wow.
If we called mom and dad and said, hey, Joe was partying this weekend and we're going to have to send him home for 3 days because our handbook calls for a 3-day suspension for breaking the rule on alcohol or whatnot. If the mother or father started lashing out and saying, well, what'd you do to the rest of the kids? Or I can't believe you guys are this strict on those things. I mean, let these kids, boys will be boys. If that was the response from mom and dad, I knew the kid wouldn't grow. There would be no maturation process through this discipline. But if mom responded and said, thanks for calling us, we've raised him better than this, he knows better, send him home. And we're going to work with you to make sure this ends well. If it was something like that, I would turn to my staff and I would say, this is going to be a good thing because that mom's response proves that she's on the same page with us. And that kid will come back more mature, more responsible, a better person as a result of us kicking him in the tail a little bit and holding him accountable for his decisions and his life and his morality and his integrity because mom's going to do the same thing rather than helicopter over him and rescue him from the pain that he rightfully should endure right now as the result of his own personal decisions.
One of the quotes that I found in your book, Grow Up, that really was profound. I've shared this with several people. Notice this quotation. Show me the heroes that the youth of your country look up to, and I will tell you the future of your country. That is a quotation that Dr. Piper came across while he was putting together this book. And so when you see young people almost idolizing or looking up to, quite frankly, people that aren't assuming responsibility. You know, I can remember growing up where you would look at these World War II veterans and you would look at these men and I mean, you just think, wow, look at them. You know, they were rugged, they were tough, they had gone through stuff. And for the most part, they weren't real mouthy about those experiences. They weren't saying much about them. They kind of suffered in silence. I'm seeing a bit of a surge of that in our generation to where there's this movement among young men to say, hey, marry somebody you love, raise a family, get a job. You know, these, what in your book you mentioned certain milestones. You know, I can remember turning 18, Dr. Piper and I enlisted in the selective service. I mean, you know, from this day on, they have my name and contact information. If I need to be drafted, if they need me, I'm there. I can remember registering to vote. I can remember voting for my first time. That was a rite of passage. That was a big deal. And getting married and these milestones. And I think one of the concerns that Dr. Piper, he feels like when the government creates such a dependency, not only are you dependent on us to take care of you, then all of a sudden you're inferior in your own ability to mature and to assume responsibility. Your thoughts, Dr. Piper?
It is true. Again, a lot of these principles are so simple. My dad did not have a high school degree, let alone a college degree, but my dad was wise. He wasn't stupid. He just chose to go to work at a young age and take care of his family. He was a truck driver. He had a small private business at one time. My dad was a good man. He was a simple man. And a lot of the lessons he taught me, I'll never forget. The first time I got bucked off a horse, get back on. Simple. I mean, he didn't come running over and cuddle me and, oh my goodness, no, don't ever get on a horse again. No, he just, get back on. Like, that's it. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Get back on. I remember the first job I ever had, real job. I was just graduated from high school. And because I was a blue-collar kid from a blue-collar family, my ambition was to get a job at the best factory in town, the one that paid the best money. And this was in Hillsdale, Michigan. And my job was to be a janitor at Hillsdale Tool and Manufacturing. They paid good money. Everybody who was a factory rat of sorts, blue-collar, other side of the tracks type person in that area of the county had an ambition, would love to get a job with Hillsdale Tool and Manufacturing. Well, as a janitor, my job wasn't to clean the toilets. It was to clean out the oil baths of these, what were called chuckers and screw machines, these machines that turned metal, turned steel to make automobile parts. So I was saturated with grease and whatnot every night. I remember before I went to work the first night on that job, my dad pulled me aside and he had this simple advice for me. He said, Everett, if you've done everything they tell you to do, go pick up a broom and start sweeping. Now stop and think about that. He was basically saying, don't stand around waiting to be told what to do. If you've done your job and you don't know what they want you to do next, don't just stand around. Find a broom and push it. Sweep it. Clean something. Do something. Take responsibility for your own success and for your own reputation. Because if you're the only guy in the shop that bothered to go over and grab a broom, you're probably going to earn the favor of your boss. Now, he didn't say all of that, but that's what he meant. Everett, if you've done everything they told you to do, pick up a broom and start sweeping. That's great advice. That's sagely wisdom. That's a father telling his son, don't whine about it, don't complain about it, don't expect everybody else to take responsibility for your own success. You're responsible for the way your life is going to play out. So find a broom and start sweeping.
That's a great place to take a break right there. We're going to take a break right here. That is the voice of Dr. Everett Piper. Dr. Piper has written several books, one of which is the book we're featuring today, Grow Up. My name is Tom Arnould. This is the Oasis Radio Network. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back on the other side of the break and continue our discussion with Dr. Everett Piper.
I'm Karen Jensen Salisbury, one of the hosts you hear on the Oasis Network Roadshow. For 35 years, this 1 hour of the day has inspired and motivated you, our listeners, with thousands of stories of people whose lives demonstrate the truth that with God, all things are possible. It's an hour that you should make a part of your day, Monday through Friday, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Roadshow, an Oasis Network presentation.
In case you're just joining us for today's Roadshow, my name is Tom Arnould. I have a very special guest today, a repeat guest. His name is Dr. Everett Piper. Dr. Piper had joined us previously when he featured his book, Not a Daycare, and today we're talking about growing up. And we're talking about, in this segment, one of the key components to growing up is whenever we assume responsibility. Dr. Piper, you mean I'm responsible for my life? I don't know that I like that, Dr. Piper. I want you to take responsibility for my life.
You know, one of the stories in the news recently that I think drives home this point and why it's important for us to continue to talk about this is the election of Zohran Mamdani in New York. His acceptance speech after his victory was very telling. Now, I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm pretty close to what he said. He emphasized the fact that government could solve the problems of New York City and that government was responsible and not the individual. Wow. That was the basic message of his acceptance speech. It wasn't that we all need to come together and do our share. It wasn't ask not what your government can do for you, ask what you can do for your government. It wasn't that. It was that he reversed the equation and said that government could solve these problems by giving more stuff. I would argue making people more dependent rather than independent in the way they live their daily lives. give up your freedom, give up all of these things that you want to do in your daily life to the government, and the government will take care of you. And that isn't just a story in New York City right now. To some degree, it's a story across our entire nation, across our entire culture. Why do you have so many people in millennial age or younger that are sympathetic to socialism right now? It's because they want someone else to take care of the adversity of life. And as the result of doing that, they live in ongoing dependency on that something else or someone else that they've given over their lives to. And that dependency, I would argue, is synonymous with what I referred to earlier as ongoing adolescence, perpetual adolescence, where you're not taking charge of yourself by finding the broom and sweeping for yourself. You're always looking to someone else to do it for you. And if life gets ugly, if you suffer some setbacks, then it's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. Somebody else caused that. The intersectionality of life, if you will. This is the argument of critical theory, that it's some other entity's fault that you're suffering the difficulty of life that's just innate with the human being, and that you have to give up your freedom and be dependent on somebody with more authority, more power, more knowledge, more expertise than you. And if you give your life over to them, then all will be well. All will be well. Folks, that's just a lie. That's not the way life works. And the time-tested truths, one of the things I say over and over again, I'm a conservative. Big surprise listening to me for the last half hour or so. I'm a conservative. But what is a conservative? A conservative is essentially a conservationist. Same root word. Conservationist is a conservative. A conservative is a conservationist. I believe in conserving things because I'm a conservative. I believe in conserving clean water and clean air. I believe in that. That's a good thing to do. But I also believe as a conservative that there are some other things that are equal, if not more important, to conserve, and those would be the time-tested truths, those ideas that have endured over the centuries and over the millennia. And one of those ideas is the ideas of independence, the idea of freedom, the idea of liberty. Jesus tells us that the truth will set us free. Why did he emphasize the importance of freedom? He didn't say the truth will make you more dependent. He didn't say the truth will make you safe. He didn't say the truth will make you comfortable. He said the truth shall set you free. I think, again, what do we value as a people? What do we value as individuals? Do we value our independence, or do we want to be dependent on someone or something else? The despots understand this. But Mao and Pol Pot and Robespierre and Chavez and Mussolini and Hitler all understood this principle, that if people feel dependent upon you, your expertise, your authority, your power, your government, whatever that is, if they feel dependent upon you, if they're going to look to you to be the solution to everything, then you can control them.
Right.
Now you have control. In fact, if you want to go back to the first century, the Roman Empire understood this and bred in circuses. All you have to do is make people feel dependent upon you for the recreation in the Colosseum and the bread in the circuses that you will give them. If they feel that that's where they need to go to be fulfilled in life, whether it be to have a full belly or rather to feel fulfilled in their leisure time, then you can control them. You'll still have problems, but blame the Christians. Burn the Christians. Put them to death because they're at fault for anything that's wrong with culture. And now we see it today in the rising anti-Semitism in our culture, even from the right. We're going to blame the Jews. It's their fault, okay? It's not our fault. It's the Jews' fault. That's one of the most disturbing things of our culture right now, especially on the right. I feel like I'm living in 1939 again with some of the anti-Semitic remarks that are being made, not just on the left, but on the right. Blame other people. Blame other people. Don't take responsibility for yourself.
This is such a powerful statement. I mean, when I think of our Oasis family, I know kind of the nature and the core beliefs of so many of the listeners on the Oasis. And, you know, we are thankful that we are we the people, and that we know that we the people, the constitutional preamble, what that looked like back in the day was a very conservative group of people that certainly believed in responsibility, personal responsibility, honoring God, living a life for the glorification of God. Now, I'm going to tell you one of the scriptures that doesn't get a lot of airtime. It's not like a refrigerator verse. It may not even made it to that little, that bread of life that you put on the kitchen table. It may not have made the cut, but nonetheless, it is the words of the Apostle Paul. And it's found here in Galatians chapter 6. Most of us are familiar with this passage. Paul said, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." But that's not all he said. He also went on to say this, "For each one will bear his own load." So in the short run, we're there to help people that have fallen, people that have slipped into sin. We're there to restore them. But in the long run, that person is to resume their life and to bear their own load and to walk out their own faith. Now, we're there for one another. Certainly the Gospels has a lot to say about the one another's of the New Testament that's repeated time and time again. But we're just trying to emphasize to the Oasis family here that there's a danger whenever people just will not accept responsibility. It was always somebody else's fault, or this happened, instead of going, you know what, it was me. I was wrong. There's a proverb that talks about whoever covers their sin is not going to prosper, but whoever will confess it and forsake it, they're going to find mercy in life. And so what we're emphasizing today is somebody said you need to grow up, show up, and step it up. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're here to do today, is to grow up and to just realize, Lord, help me to take responsibility. One of the comments that you made, or one of the statements that you made, is there is no growth without growing in responsibility. So if some young person or whatever, independent of their age, is wanting to mature, they're really not going to grow up unless they're willing to grow up in responsibility. You can't skip over this.
I think there's a lesson there with regard to ownership. When we talk about ownership, you can talk about it in the context of owning something that's material, a house, a car, owning your property. There's value in that, and I'm going to explain why. But ownership isn't just the material. Ownership is owning your own life. Take responsibility. Own your own decisions. Own your own integrity. Own yourself. So there's ownership of integrity, ownership of who you are. Take responsibility for yourself. Own it. People say, hey, you made the decision. Own it. I agree with that. So it's this concept of ownership. I read that one of George Washington's favorite Bible verses, it's a very obscure verse. It's not one you would put on your refrigerator to go down the same path that you were on there. It's Micah 4:4. And that verse that he reportedly cited over 50 times to his fellow founding fathers through correspondence, letters, and whatnot. George Washington was repeatedly and constantly referring to Micah 4:4. Now, what does Micah 4:4 say? Every man shall live under his own vine and his own fig tree and shall not be afraid. Now, why? When I first read that, that's a weird verse. Why would you put that on your refrigerator door? Every man shall live under his own vine and his own fig tree and shall not be afraid. But if you read further about what George Washington was saying and why he was saying it within the context of the development of this young nation, the United States of America, and the freedom and the liberty that they were pursuing, the individual responsibility, he was saying that if it's your vine, your fig tree, your ranch, your home, your farm, your house, your car, if they're your kids, if this is your family, if you take ownership for your life, you shall not be afraid of anyone else. The despot can't control you. Yes, you'll have challenges, economic challenges. How are you going to pay for it all? You'll have challenges. You're going to have to grow your own food. You're going to have to farm your own land. You're going to have to raise your own children. And in that day and age, you're going to have to educate your own kids. This is your responsibility. It's your problem, but it's yours. It's your vine. It's your fig tree. It's your life. You shall not be afraid. There's a lot of value in that biblical admonition that at first blush when we read it, at least when I read it, I thought, well, that's just a weird verse of the Old Testament. I don't know for sure how I would apply that to my life, but there's a lot of application there when you understand why George Washington considered it perhaps one of his favorite verses.
That's excellent. I love that. I've never heard that portion of, about his life. That's very, very interesting. Dr. Piper, a number of years ago, we went on a vacation down to Houston, Texas. And it just like one of those random side adventures, we ended up going to what was labeled in Houston as the Apollo Mission Control Center. In other words, they literally brought you in a room. You're able to actually see what that Houston, we have a problem. What did that look like? That whole Apollo 13, 1970 mission that, they call it the successful failure. It didn't go as planned. Now, there were a lot of things they covered, but Dr. Piper, the one comment they made that has stuck with me, and I cross-referenced it, they brought out that the average age of the controllers, the people that were responsible during that national crisis, the average age was 26 years of age. That was the average age. And so what we're talking about here is not like some concept that's totally foreign to our nation, but the fact of the matter is, whether it's our founding fathers, whether it is the people that helped avoid tragedy with the Apollo 13, it was people that are young people that assume responsibility, that are the Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego's, and Daniels of their generation that are quick, bright, sharp, smart, that are applied. So what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Piper?
Well, again, what I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in previous generations, people took responsibility at a younger age, and they were accomplishing great things at a younger age than what we see today. The greatest generation, they went off to war when they were 17 and 18, and they saved America, probably saved Western civilization from the Nazi regime. We might all be speaking German today if it hadn't have been for those 17 and 18-year-old men that actually sacrificed, in many cases, their all for the sake of liberty, for the sake of freedom, for the sake of being independent rather than dependent on something like the government. Again, I'm sorry to keep going back to my truck driver dad, but I don't remember ever being told this, but I knew it was an expectation that once I graduated from high school that I was expected to start acting and living like a man. And part of that was start earning your own keep. I don't ever remember anybody saying, hey, it's time for you to move out of the house. But I knew that I wasn't supposed to just be hanging around doing nothing any longer, that my obligation was to earn enough money to buy my own car, my own clothes, and ultimately to figure out where I was going to live, get my own apartment, my own house, or figure out how to pay for college. I mean, those were things that I just assumed I was obligated to do as a 17, 18-year-old graduate from high school. I've told this story to my college kids. I used to have a practice of kind of sharing my testimony with our college students at Oklahoma Wesleyan because I wanted them to understand. I mean, this wasn't all just given to me. I didn't have, my PhD wasn't mailed to me as a Christmas gift, and my college education I had to earn. And no, I wasn't privileged. Just because of the color of my skin, I wasn't privileged. In fact, in many ways, I had a lot fewer privileges than almost every one of you sitting in this classroom because I was from the other side of the tracks. Like I said earlier, my mom and dad didn't even have high school degrees, let alone college degrees, so don't talk to me about privilege, whether it be white privilege or anything else. I've had to fight my way through, even to earn my spot on the basketball team. I remember when I was a freshman in high school that the starting squad on the basketball team was all white-collar kids. They came from the small business class of Hillsdale, Michigan. And I had a coach that had an interesting philosophy. He told everybody, if you think you deserve a starting position, then I will let you challenge somebody on the starting squad during practice. You play one-on-one. You pick the kid that you want to go one-on-one against. And if you beat him, that doesn't guarantee you his starting spot, but I'll definitely consider it as a major variable. So I wasn't stupid. I picked the weakest kid out of the five, and I said, I'm going to play him. So I picked him, I beat him, I all of a sudden am on the starting squad. This blue-collar kid from the other side of the tracks is now in there with all the white-collar kids. So what's the moral of that story? I'm not going to accept your judgment against me. I'm not going to accept your white-collar bigotry. I'm not going to let you look down your nose at me. I'm going to prove you're wrong, and I'm going to work my way out of this. I used to tell my students this all the time. I told them that my dad and mom expected me to earn my own keep when I was 17, 18 years old. So I went to work in the factory. I worked a second job picking apples with migrant workers in an apple orchard during the day, and I worked third shift at night. It sounds like, well, I went to school uphill both ways in barefoot in the snow. I mean, it sounds like one of those stories, and I would laugh and joke about it. But the bottom line, what's the moral here? The moral of the story is sometimes the people that are younger than me will say, okay, boomer, we hear your stories. I hate that. I hate the chronological snobbery of assuming that anybody that's a little older than you doesn't know as much as you. That's stupid. That's ridiculous. The chronological snobbery of our age is ridiculous, and we need to challenge it. And that's part of what I think your comment leads to.
Well, Dr. Piper, I think for me, when I hear you tell those stories, thank God for your dad. I bless his memory. I think of my dad's advice for me. You know how you tell your story and I find myself thinking back. I can remember my dad telling me, Tom, guess what? You'll never be unemployed. And I'm like, well, I won't. No, you'll never, because you'll have a job. It's finding a job.
Yeah.
And now, look, I'm very sensitive. I realize there are many good-hearted listeners listening to us, and they are in a tight spot, and they truly are giving it their all. I'm not trying to make one size fit all. But my dad, some way or another, made it clear to me that, Tom, you'll never be without a job because your job will be to find a job. And so that kind of stuck with me. And, my father was the same way. He was old school. He grew up. One time, I'll tell you this funny story, Dr. Piper, and we're going to wrap up on this. My dad one time told me this. I go, Dad, you're just a genius. I mean, you can fix cars, you can repair washing machines, you can do anything. You're just a genius, And he goes, Tom, I'm really not a genius. He goes, if your car's broke down and you got to go to work tomorrow and the kids have got to be in school, you'll figure out how to fix that car. And so that always stuck with me. Okay, so this is today's roadshow. We have been visiting with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Everett Piper. We've been featuring his book, Grow Up, and we're just talking about one of the key components to growing up is you got to take responsibility. That is the history of our nation, that whether you quote George Washington, whether you look at the men that rescued Apollo 13, or whether you look at, historically the people that have had a profound impact in our nation, look at the age of the disciples. I mean, where do you just stop with this? You just go one after another. They were young men that God raised up, and women that God raised up to serve for such a time as this. Dr. Piper, thank you for being a part of today's roadshow. We're going to sign off at this time, but I want to say thank you, Dr. Everett Piper. Dr. Piper, your web address is?
Go to dreverettpiper.com. That's DR, as in doctor, DR, Everett Piper, EverettPiper.com. That's my website. You can follow me on Twitter. It's just Dr. Everett Piper. And I've got two Facebook pages. One's under Everett Piper. That's my personal page. And then I have a professional page that's under Dr. Everett Piper.
So on behalf of the Oasis Radio Network, my name is Tom Arnould, along with my very special guest, Dr. Everett Piper. I want to say thank you for joining us for today's roadshow. Also, I want to say thank you to all of our sponsors and our Watchman partners for being a part of today's roadshow, because, see, you made today's roadshow possible. And I want to leave you with a verse that's found over in the book of Ephesians chapter 4, and it's when the Apostle Paul simply said, speaking the truth in love, that you may grow up. Join us next time for another great roadshow.
You've been listening to The Road Show. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Road Show, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Road Show, an Oasis Network presentation.